So Tekashi69, rap artist out of New York, name is resurfacing around this Lil Durk case. And the reason why Tekashi69 name is resurfacing around this Lil Durk case, and I think the interview he had with Akademiks and Wack 100 is going to be played inside the courtroom during this Lil Durk murder for hire trial that's coming up in the next day or so. Tekashi69 video is going to come up because they're going to say that Tekashi69 in that interview, he was basically talking about how Durk is not sliding for Von. Once Von got killed, he was basically in that video stating that Durk is not sliding for Von and all that shit they talking they raps is cap. That's basically what he was saying because a lot of people was getting on Tekashi69 back, including Durk and a lot of people from OTF and just a lot of people in the rap industry because Tekashi69 caught a federal indictment himself and he snitched in his indictment. You know, he snitched on his co-defendants in his indictment in order to get a lenient sentence and not go to prison for the rest of his life. Now, Tekashi69, when he came home, he admitted he snitched. You know, he went on interviews and podcasts and he admitted he snitched. And his reasoning for snitching is that the cats that I was doing business with and I had in my circle was basically extorting him. They kidnapped him. One of them, that I think was his manager, was backdooring him and sleeping with his baby mama. You know, his circle actually kidnapped him for ransom, the same niggas he rock with. You know, so he said once he set up in that cell, realized how much time he was facing for some cats that's backdooring him, you know, making side deals, you know, booking him for shows, you know, getting, you know, Tekashi was a big artist. You know, they probably was booking Tekashi for a show for 60,000, telling them they got, you know, 40. Tekashi probably going, man, 40 too low, bro. He like, man, gonna do it for me. This is my folks. Not knowing after he performed, he get the 40, they getting 20 on the back end. You know, so a lot of this stuff he figured out about his team. So when Tekashi sat in that cell, realizing he about to do 20 to 40 years for some cats that's back doing him, he went on and became the federal government's witness, and he basically debriefed. You know what I mean? And they gave Tekashi, you know, time served with some federal probation, and he came home. So when he came home, everybody knew he snitched. You know, all the artists say they ain't dealing with him. Lil Baby, Durk, the whole little, you know, the whole little team, Pooh Shiesty, any artist that was kind of like in that drill music era right then, turned their back on him. 21 Savage, you know, all these cats, right? But what happened is Wack 100, you know, the manager of Blueface, you know, he's a podcaster, a content creator, a music manager. You know, Wack been around for years. Wack started doing a little business with Tekashi. He's seen a window of opportunity. That's what I get. I give Wack his credit. Wack is an opportunist. You know, business is business and bullshit is bullshit. And you know, Wack gonna go get the money. So Wack started doing a little business with Tekashi, which end up them getting on a podcast together with Akademiks. And basically that's where Tekashi69, when he found out that King Von died, he started ranting and raving to Lil Durk that them niggas ain't sliding for Von. You know, and the district attorney and the federal government right now in this Lil Durk murder for hire case is going to point to that interview and say this interview and other things that was being said by the trollers, you know, when you going live and, you know, all the people are just straight saying that Durk them ain't got no loyalty because they not sliding for Von. Now, how does that play a position in the Durk case? Because if you look at the Durk case, if you following it, everybody know one of Quando Rondo associates that's in his circle, they the one killed King Von. King Von and Quando Rondo was at a hookah lounge. King Von ran up on Quando Rondo and start basically whooping on Quando Rondo. When King Von did that, one of Quando Rondo boys came out with a pistol and killed King Von. When he killed King Von, he was arrested, but they called it a justifiable homicide and let him out. Once they let him out, that's when Tekashi69 started ranting online about Durk ain't sliding for Von. Basically, the cat who killed Von is still alive. So what ended up happening is maybe like a year or so later, after 6ix9ine made those statements online in that podcast, a little bit later, Durk was interviewed by Akademiks by himself, and he said himself that, yeah, people was online talking about why we ain't sliding for Vaughn. I really ain't been hearing him saying too much about that lately. You know, he didn't say what happened, but I mean, if you were to read between the lines, why isn't people saying slide for Vaughn? You know, is he kind of hinting to the fact that we did slide for him? And y'all know we did. That's why y'all ain't saying nothing. You know what I mean? So, like I say, it's just a lot coming in this Lil Durk case. And this is what's putting Tekashi69 back in the light, you know, online. You know, he's a big artist anyway. You know, Tekashi69 got a cult following. You know, he got a lot of fans that love him. And you know, whenever Tekashi get online, man, it do big numbers. You know, you can't take no credit away from the kid. You know, he ratted, got on the stand, admitted he ratted, whatever the case may be, he still generate money out the music industry, and he making money off interviews, and ain't no telling what other business ventures he got going on. So Tekashi69 is a big name. You know, and you got to start taking a look at situations like this. You know, Durk them, you know, they basically feeling like Durk had a lot of pressure on him. You know, this is what the prosecutor's going to state in this case. Durk had a lot of pressure on him, and a lot of people was, you know, basically making him feel like, you know, he got to bust a play because everybody watching, the street guys, you know, people who basically give you credit for being a gangster and all this, you know. So like I say, but the DA, they can use that as some evidence. That interview from Tekashi69 and said that this is another motive. Because, see, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to get a motive of why he done it, you know, and they're trying to paint this picture for the jury. Because you can't just go in and say, hey, this is a murder for hire. These dudes killed somebody. They part of the OTF camp. So we already know Durk is the one who sent them to do that. You can't really do that. You got to kind of have a motive. You got to kind of like paint this picture. You got to walk the jury to the murder. You know, you can't just say Durk murder. You got to go Durk, this, that, this. You know, all of this stuff is leading up to it. But if you really look at it, they don't have a smoking gun on Durk. They don't have a murder weapon with his fingerprints on it. They don't have Durk at the scene. They don't have text messages of Durk actually telling someone to go kill him for a price. You know, it's a lot of things they don't have, but they have enough stuff that kind of make you just sit back and go, you know, damn, did he pay it? You know, so, but like I say, Durk got some great lawyers, you know, and this is what the lawyers are basically going to be paid to do, is they're going to be paid to paint a picture that there's doubt Durk could have done this. You know, yes, a lot of stuff pointing towards Durk, but we're going to base our case on the fact of he didn't do it, and this is why he didn't do it, and look at the evidence. There's nothing pointing and linking him direct to the murders. Now, the only problem Durk is going to have is they have these 20 witnesses. That's the problem. And who these witnesses are, a couple of names is coming out. I'm going to make another video about these 20 witnesses. But this is just part of the case. Will Tekashi69 be subpoenaed? I don't think so. You know, he don't have direct contact with Durk. You know, him and Durk never done videos, far as I know, songs, far as I know. They never really moved around in the same circle. Like I say, Tekashi69 is out of New York. Durk them is out of Chicago, but really was based in Atlanta when a lot of this stuff was happening. You know, a lot of these murders was happening. One was in LA, one was in Chicago. There was a shooting incident with Quando Rondo at a show he had in Atlanta. The police investigated that shooting. They're trying to say that that was part of the beef. You know, so that's why you could see them slowly trying to get Rondo. But the police investigated that shooting in Atlanta with Quando Rondo. It was an attempt on his life. They were saying that they felt that wasn't no gang activity. You know, the police basically investigated that, you know, to the fullest extent of the law, and they felt like it was just random. It could have been anybody. It could have been, you know, they didn't have nothing that pointed it towards a beef he was having with another artist in the industry. So, you know, they're gonna dissect this Tekashi69 interview. They're gonna probably try to find other interviews online with Tekashi69 talking about Lil Durk and saying that these are the things that push Durk over the edge, because you got to look at it. This is a multi-million-dollar Grammy Award nominating artist Why would he want to risk everything he has and all his accomplishments to pay someone to go kill someone that actually wasn't even harming him? You know, this is the picture that his attorneys and his legal team is going to push to the jury to try to get Durk acquitted of these charges. This the Aaron L Show. Comment, subscribe to the channel, show your boy some love. We'll be back at you.